Hello students, we have discussed W.H. Audin's poem in our early lecture, that was The Shield of Achilles. The second prescribed poem that we are going to study is that of In Memory of W.B. Yeats. You must be aware, or we have already studied two poems by W.B. Yeats. A Prayer for My Daughter and the second coming. In this particular poem, W.B. Yeats is remembered by W.H. Auden as W.B. Yeats died on January 1939. As we have seen, this particular poem, it's a death poem, means it's mourning, or we can say it's an elegy. W.B. Yeats is one of the greatest English poets of the modern age. His reputation as a poet is very well known, especially in English literature and more particularly in Irish literature. We have seen the poem is in elegiac conventions, but it is not the true sense an elegy, but it's an ironic elegy written by W.H. Auden. So, what are the changes that have occurred after the death of W.B. Yeats is mentioned in the earlier section of the poem. So, we just need to go through the earlier section number 1 of the poem, and then we will try to interpret and see how the poet has given us the things in the poetic lines. Let us go through the poetic lines. He disappeared in the dead of winter. The brooks were frozen, the airports almost deserted, and snow disfigured the public statues. The mercury sank in the mouth of the dying day. Oh, all the instruments agree. The day of his death was dark, cold day. Far from his illness, the world ran on through. The evergreen forest, the peasant river was untempted by the fashionable craze. By mourning tongues, the death of the poet was kept from his poems. But for him, it was his last afternoon as himself, an afternoon of nurses and rumors. The provinces of his dead body revolted, the squares of his mind were empty. Silence invaded suburbs, the current of his feeling failed. He became his admirers. So here the poet W.B. Yeats is dead in January 1939. It was certainly cold day. It was the atmosphere looks like a deserted, as it was very cold. It was dead winter because of the death. He disappeared, means he passed away. The brooks were, due to coldness and the winter season, the brooks were frozen, and due to snowfall, even the flights and airports cannot take off. The poet gives us the images taken from the modern urban city life. We have seen that this particular poem hints at the deadening atmosphere caused by the snowfall. Everywhere there is a white snowfall. The plains were all grounded. The airports were deserted. The mercury has sank, means the temperature has drastically come down. The intensity of the cold is indicated here in the winter season, and at in such a atmosphere W.B. Yeats who passed away. All the instruments agree. So whatever recording, temperature recording or whatever indicating snowfall, rainfall, all instruments are indicating that this day of W.B. Yeats' death is a dark, cold day. The images and symbols that indicate here is a disfiguring, frozening kind of atmosphere that we see here. See, the poet is indicating here. So, we just need to go into the details of the day on which W.B. Yeats has passed away. Far from his illness, the wolves ran on through the evergreen forest. The peasant river was untempted by the fashionable craze. By morning tongues, the date of the poet was kept from his poems. Nature was not at all affected by death. Far from his illness, the wolves ran on through evergreen forest. Means it is far. His illness and his consequent death. Apart from that, the wolves are running in the forest, in the evergreen forest. They are moving here and there. Autumn is a reverse. It's treating ironically that nothing has changed. The wolves are running in the forest. They are enjoying their life. This type of a pastoral type of elegy, which shows that all nature is mourning the death in the pastoral elegy. But here, poet is moving apart. He is treating ironically that wolves are running. Peasants' river are untemptable by the fashionable craze. Means whatever reputation, whatever name and greatness that W.B. Yeats has earned throughout his poetry and throughout his life, everything is kept apart. The peasant is doing his work. He is untempted. He is not attracted by the death. The peasants are doing their work. So it is apart from the death of W.B. Yeats, everything in the nature is going on as usual. W.B. येट्सच्या मृत्यूपासून कोणताही परिणाम निसर्गावर झालेला नाही. त्याच्या मृत्यूचा परिणाम कुठेही आजूबाजूला दिसत नाही आहे. पण तो दिवस मात्र एक डार्क कोल्ड डे होता. सगळे काही रेकॉर्ड सांगत आहे का तो खूप थंडीचा आणि डेडनिंग अशा पद्धतीचा एक दिवस होता, जो हिवाळ्याचा खूप मिनिमम टेम्परेचर असलेला तो दिवस. हे सर्व इंडिकेट करतात का हे तो दिवस हा मृत्यूचा दिवस होता. पण पोएट सेकंड स्टांजामध्ये सांगतोय का त्या सगळ्या मृत्यूपासून, या सगळ्या गोष्टी ज्या आहेत मृत्यूपासून, त्या सर्व गोष्टी ॲज युज्युअल आहेत. wolves, they are running. Peasants, they are working, they are doing their job. They are not affected by his death. The poet died, and his death was certainly mourned by the world. By mourning tongues, the death of the poet was kept from his poems. Again, the poet is ironically saying that apart from his death, his poems are there, they are alive. The poems त्याच्यात त्यांनी लिहिलेल्या कविता, त्यांनी लिहिलेलं साहित्य अजूनही तसंच जिवंत आहे. त्याच्या मृत्यूचा परिणाम त्याच्या साहित्यावर झालेला नाही आहे. सो आर्ट म्हणजे पोएट्री इज अन आर्ट. आर्ट इज अलाइव्ह. It is still lives on. Art still lives on. Art is not affected by the death of the artist. So it is the perpetual nature of the art that he emphasizes here. So Odin gives the stress on the permanence of the art, everlasting art, and through this art the poet wished to convey that W.B. Yeats has contributed a great deal. He himself, as a body, he himself, as a man, individual, has passed away, but his creative writing, his literature, his poetry is behind him. And this poetry, or whatever poems he has written, this poetry is going to be read by the people across the world. But for him it was his last afternoon as himself, an afternoon of nurses and rumors. See, as a human being, but for him, means as a W.B. Yeats, as a man, as a living being, has only this afternoon to himself to live. तोच फक्त दिवस त्या दुपारचा दिवस तेवढाच त्याचा आज होता. ह्या दुपारच्या कालावधीमध्ये नर्सेस आहेत, रूमर्स आहेत, ही सर्व इकडे तिकडे फिरत होती. They are moving here because nurses were running this way on that way. They are moving. त्याला सेव्ह करणं, त्याची बातमी. He is a great poet, of course. They know that W.B. Yeats was a great man, great poet. So different views were expressed. Rumors, अफवा आहेत, काही न्यूज आहेत, हे सर्व इकडे तिकडे पसरत होत्या त्या दुपारच्या वेळेस. The provinces of his body revolted. See, the death, it's type of a metaphysical conceit. W.B. Yeats is compared to be an emperor. The provinces of his body means every part of his body, provinces, क्षेत्र, body parts, हे सगळे रिव्होल्ट केले आणि त्याच्यावर शरीरावर असलेला कंट्रोल हळूहळू लूज पडला. द स्क्वेअर्स ऑफ हिज माइंड, मनामध्ये मेंदूमध्ये जे काही जिवंतपणा आहे तो सुद्धा निघून गेला, एम्प्टी झाला. द स्क्वेअर्स ऑफ हिज माइंड वेर एम्प्टी and slowly silence invaded the suburbs. The current of his feeling failed. He became his admirers. So the poet uses these images. The squares of his mind become empty. They lose the power of their thinking. The suburbs, everything becomes silent, and the poet, like the lines of communication in a country, it ceases to flow. The current, the blood, and the thought process in the mind, in the brain becomes empty. His feeling has failed, and as a man, it's a process of a death that he gives, or it gives the process of his death, and everything become easy, emptied and lifeless. जिवंतपणा त्याच्यातून शरीरातला निघाला त्या दुपारच्या वेळेमध्ये. अँड ॲज अ ह्युमन बिईंग त्याचं साहित्य मागं राहिलं आणि म्हणून तो त्याचाच ॲडमायरर बनला. हिज पोएट्री विल लिव्ह ऑन. इट शॅल अंडरगो ट्रान्सफॉर्मेशन थ्रू successive interpretations and evaluations and critical opinions and everything. He will be called as a great poet, great by the readers and by the critic. He will believe, his poetry will be there. What his admirers make of it will again admire. He became his admirers. Now he is scattered among the 100 cities. and wholly given over to unfamiliar affections, to find his happiness in another kind of wood and be punished under the foreign code of conscience. The words of a dead man are modified in the guts of the living. Now, just like an ashes are sprayed over the country, his news, the death news, has passed scattered into the 100 cities across the world. Yeats's poems are scattered all over the world. He, as a poet, is known to the world, and the death of his, say, W.B. Yeats, spread across the cities, across the countries. He is now entirely at the mercy of the people who did not know him, but he is known to them. He is scattered among the 100 cities and given over to unfamiliar affections. Means everybody is saying. Instead, they are unknown. They are known or unknown to his literature, means Yeats's literature. सगळ्यांना ते साहित्य माहीत आहे असं नाही आहे, पण ज्यांना माहिती नाही आहेत असे अनफॅमिलियर आहेत त्यांना सुद्धा ह्या ग्रेट पोएटविषयी सेन्सिबिलिटी वाटते, संवेदना वाटते, बिकॉज ही इज definitely a great poet of modern age. His poetry has spread that to find his happiness in another kind of wood and be punished under a foreign code of conscience. See, in such a, there are so many things that are there in unfamiliar, means unknown countries, foreign countries. He tries to find out. See, he tries to find out the rules of conduct and art. The poet is feeling strange in unfamiliar countries, but the work of the dead poet like Yeats. The words of dead man are modified in the guts of living. The words, the poetry work is going to be transformed, it's to be changed through interpretations by the readers. Even his poetry does not live on as it is, it undergoes the transformation. Just as his body is transformed from living into dead and dead into nothingness, his body will decompose and it will be transformed in the grave. Okay, मृत्यूच्या गाडल्या गेल्यामुळे त्याचं अस्तित्व हे इव्हॅपोरेट होणारे, निघून जाणारे, बॉडी कुजून जाणारे तिथे. So his poetry is transformed by his readers. See, but in the importance of noise of tomorrow, when the brokers are roaring like a beast on the floor of the bows, and the poor have the suffering to which they are fairly accustomed, and each in the sale of himself is almost convinced of his freedom, a few thousand will think of this day as one thinks of a day when one did something slightly unusual. Oh, all the instruments agree. The day of his death was a dark, cold day. See, but the importance of the lies of tomorrow, as himself living in this world, the poet, but in the importance and noise of tomorrow, when everybody is usual doing their work, the traders in the share market, they will be speaking loudly, announcing the rates, bows. See, business will be carried on in the marketplace. The business exchange, means the stock exchange, they will continue to hum and exchange the business and doing their business activity as usual. They were roaring like beasts प्राण्यांसारखे मोठ्या आवाजामध्ये मार्केट प्लेसमध्ये ओरडण्याचं काम, अनाऊन्स करण्याचं काम, रेट्स अनाऊन्स करण्याचं काम ते तसंच करत राहतील. द पुअर विल कंटिन्यू टू बी पुअर. जे गरीब आहेत ते तसेच राहतील. त्यांना ते पॉवर्टी त्यांना फेस करण्यासाठी ते अतिशय त्या ठिकाणी काय झाले, अकस्टम्ड झाले आहेत. त्यांनी ते स्वीकारलेलं आहे. आणि दॅट इज वॉट, ते तशाच पद्धतीचं आपलं जीवन कंठत राहत असतील. सी, इन each cell of himself is almost convinced of his freedom. प्रत्येक प्रिझनर आहे जो आपल्या स्वतःच्याच सीमेमध्ये प्रिझनर, आपल्या स्वतःच्या सेल्फिशनेसमध्ये, इगोमध्ये तसाच अडकून पडलेला असं, त्याच्यामध्येच त्याचं स्वतःचं स्वातंत्र्य त्याला उपभोगायला मिळत असेल. A few thousand will think of this day. जे रीडर्स आहेत, W.B. येट्स आहेत, त्याच्या ॲडमायरर्स असतील, रीडर्स असतील, फॅन्स असतील, तेवढेच मात्र आजचा हा दिवस लक्षात ठेवतील. A few thousand will think of this day as one thinks of a day when one did something slightly unusual. किंवा असे कोणते काही लोक का ह्या एखाद्या विशिष्ट दिवशी आपण काही वेगळं केलेलं होतं, हे जसं लक्षात ठेवतील तसंच हा एक दिवस असा एक वेगळा दिवस म्हणून कदाचित लक्षात ठेवते. ऑल द इन्स्ट्रुमेंट्स ॲग्री. मीन्स मागे जी लाईन आली ती पुन्हा रिपीट झाली. रिफ्रेन म्हणायचं. इट्स अ रिफ्रेन अँड द रिफ्रेन इज ऑल इन्स्ट्रुमेंट्स ॲग्री. The day of his death was a dark, cold day. जसं मागच्या लाईनमध्ये हे का खरंच तो दिवस जो होता, everything was showing that this was a cold, dark day that was given in this particular section. Section second, it discusses about the poet. You were silly like us. Your gift survived it all. Now the poet is addressing to Yeats. The poet stresses that Yeats was a human being like us with all those common follies and weaknesses and doing mistakes. प्रत्येक माणसं चुकत असतात, फॉलीज असतात, विकनेसेस असतात. तसा येट्स तू सुद्धा माणूसच आहेस. देअर वॉज नथिंग एक्स्ट्रॉर्डनरी अबाउट अस. आपल्या बाबतीमध्ये किंवा तू सुद्धा आमच्यासारखाच सिली आहेस. See the ironic mode. Throughout, there are ironic contrasts with the conventional analogy. See, Orin does not glorify here W.B. Yeats, but he makes him common just like a human being. The parish of rich women, physical decay yourself. The poet with his silliness is dead, but his gift to the world is that his poetry survives. The parish of rich women, physical decay yourself. Means, see, everyone who is living like a rich man or women, physical decay is there. प्रत्येकाला शरीर हे नाशवंत असतं. ते त्याच्यामध्ये ट्रान्सफॉर्मेशन्स आपल्याला पाहायला मिळतात. आणि म्हणून जे रिच विमेन आहेत, जे शेक्सपियरच्या ऑलिव्हिया शेक्सपियर आहे किंवा लेडी ग्रेगरी आहे, जे W.B. येट्स यांच्या आयुष्यामध्ये आल्यात, ज्याने खूप मोलाचं सहकार्य लेडी ग्रेगरी यांनी केलं. तर ऑलिव्हिया शेक्सपियर ही वादातीत राहिलेलं, सोबती असलेली, समटाईम्स बिलवड मानलं जायचं किंवा समटाईम्स there were rumors of the love affairs between these two, Olivia Shakespeare and William Butler Yeats, W.B. Yeats. But everything, what you think, are definitely they are human beings, and human beings are going to be physical decay. Means there will be a transformation in their body and they will die too, like all human beings. So the same thing had happened with the W.B. Yeats. He process in the old age, disease, and death to WBS. Mad Ireland hurt you into poetry. Now Ireland has her madness and her weather still. तुझं आयर्लंड जे खूप तुझ्या मागे वेडसरपणाने धावलं, तुझा परिणाम हा इतका चांगला होता का सगळ्या आयरिश आर्ट आणि लिटरेचरचा तू रेनान्सन्स पोएट म्हणून गणला गेलास. पण द रॉंग्स ऑफ आयर्लंड कॉस्ट हिम पेन. पण जे काही आयर्लंडच्या बाबतीत घडलं त्याने तो खूप दुःखद अशा शब्दांमध्ये तू मांडलास. बिकॉज आयर्लंड वॉज अंडर द सुझरेनिटी ऑफ द ब्रिटिशर्स. आयर्लंड ब्रिटिशांच्या ताब्यात होता, जसे इंडिया होता तसं. आणि म्हणून ही ग्लोरियस असलेलं आयरिश कल्चर आहे. ते आयरिश कल्चर, ते दुःख, ते वेदना ह्या तुझ्या कवितेमधून दिसतात. आयर्लंड हर्ट यू इन टू पोएट्री. आणि त्याच्यातून, त्या दुःखातून तू घडलास आणि ग्रेट पोएट झालास. म्हणून WBS सेलिब्रेटेड आयरिश लिटरेचर, Irish culture, myths, legends, and mythology. Now, after your death, Ireland is her madness and her weather still. पण आयर्लंडच्या वातावरण जसं आहे तसंच आहे आयर्लंडचं मॅडनेस. म्हणजे ज्या पद्धतीने आयर्लंड काम करत, आयर्लंडचे असलेले जीवनक्रम आहे, लोकांचा जीवनक्रम आहे, जो जसा आहे तसाच राहणार आहे. देअर विल नॉट बी एनिथिंग so drastic that is going to be affected by your death. Kavi Sant. Poetry, nothing makes it, nothing happen. It survives in the valley of saying where executives would never want to tamper. See, जे आयरिश लिटरेचर जे तू लिहून ठेवलंस किंवा तू एक रिप्रेझेंटेटिव्ह पोएट म्हणून सर्व लिहून ठेवलंस, हे सगळं मानवाच्या जीवनामध्ये हे ऐकलं जाईल, वाचलं जाईल. तुझे फॅन्स असतील, हे सगळे ह्या व्हॅलीजमध्ये, म्हणजे ह्या पृथ्वीवर व्हॅलीज, हे त्या ठिकाणी नेहमी वाचलं जाणार आहे. ह्युमन सोल इज नॉट सब्जेक्ट टू द ॲक्शन ऑफ द ॲडमिनिस्ट्रेटर्स ऑफ द वर्ल्ड. वी आर द स्ट्रेंजर्स. आपण येणार आणि असंच निघून जाणार. आपण काही ह्या जगाचे मालक नाही आहे, ॲडमिनिस्ट्रेटर नाही आहेत. म्हणून आपण एक्झिक्युटिव्ह आहोत. ओके, सी, बट वी कॅन नॉट स्टे हिअर. वी नेवर वॉन्ट टू टॅम्पर. आपण कधीही असं टॅम्पर करून इथं थांबू शकत नाही. सो इट सर्वाइव्स. तू जे काही केलं ती पोएट्री तशीच राहणार आहे. आपण कोणीही येऊन इथे काहीही करू शकत नाही. इट फ्लोज साऊथ from ranches of isolation and the busy cliffs, raw towns that we believe and die in. It survives a way of happening, a mouth. See, simply as a record of all the possibilities and ideas which thing can happen. They do not actually happen in the present way. Poetry survives as a voice, as an expression of a human condition. It has the real significance. Poetry makes it. It flows. See, we believe that it survives a way of happening. Your poetry is going to survive. Your musical poems are going to survive. तू लिहिलेल्या संगीतमय चांगल्या कविता या पूर्ण जगामध्ये सर्वदूरपणे अस्तित्वात राहतील, वाचल्या जातील आणि इट सर्वाइव्स. त्या जिवंत राहणार आहेत. अ वे ऑफ हॅपनिंग. जसं ह्या अनेक गोष्टी घडत असतात, साहित्यामध्ये रेकॉर्ड होत असतात, त्या सर्व जशा टिकून राहिल्यात तशा ह्या टिकून राहतील. सो लाईक दिस द पोएट इज गिविंग अस द डिटेल्स ऑफ what happened and how the poet treats this death of W.B. Yeats in an ironic mode. So, poet is ironically portraying all these things. This third section we will study in the next video lecture. Thank you.